So that's really step one is take people from I understand it at a cerebral level to, oh, I actually care about this enough that I'd be willing to break the inertia of the status quo. Then the second part becomes once I've got that good intention, now we're in a place sort of like New Year's Eve resolutions where I've got great intention, I'm going to get in shape. It's like, okay, well, good, except shape is not something you do, it's something you become, and you're already a shape. So, what shape do you want to be? So, we want to take it from good intention and turn it into a daily practice. And my friend Michael Bungay Stanier wrote a great book called The Coaching Habit, which talks about the new habit formula, which is basically when this thing happens, instead of doing this thing I normally do, I'll do this new thing because, and insert the reason why it matters.
Welcome to the HR Huddle podcast, presented by Sapient Insights Group, the ultimate resource for all things HR. It's time to get in the huddle.
Hello, everyone. Welcome into the HR Huddle in 2026. I'm your host, Teri Zipper. I'm the CEO and managing partner at Sapient Insights Group, and I'm back for another exciting episode of HR We Have a Problem. This is the show where we like to break down the big and most relevant HR issues of the day. We help you make sense of what they mean for you, and we talk about what you might do about them. So joining me today is Chris Taylor. Chris is the founder and CEO of actionable.co. Welcome, Chris. Great to have you.
Teri, thanks so much. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. I'm excited for the year ahead and this conversation.
Yeah, me too. I think there's a lot going on. The world of work is in transition. And I think when we last talked, we discussed talking about a little bit about the future of work from the perspective of learning and change. I hoped we could also maybe talk about some future, but also focus on the practical versus the hype. You know, there's still a lot of hype and some of the barriers are starting to break down. But I think most people want to know, how do I personally stay relevant, and how, if I'm an HR leader or a consultant working with people in the HR field, how do I ensure my programs are relevant? And, you know, just how do I make this work? There's just a lot going on. So does that sound like a good plan to you?
That sounds great, Teri.
All right. And let's get into the huddle. So before we jump in, Chris, tell us a little bit more about yourself and your passion, and sort of how did you get into this space and this particular area that we're going to talk about here in a few minutes?
Sure. You mean the niche within a niche within a niche that I play in? That's
the critical niche.
That's it exactly. So I ran a boutique training company about 20 years ago here in Toronto, Canada, where I'm based. And I was good at it. I got the obligatory 5-star feedback forms. I had participants sending me notes of gratitude. And I had this deepening sense of misalignment between what I was being hired to do and what I really felt my purpose was. Which is to say that I was being hired and valued for the entertainment value that I was putting on in the room, when what I really wanted and believed my purpose was, and what clients should be spending their money on, was driving real change. And so I became sort of borderline obsessed with that knowing doing gap, as Bob Sutton calls it, that when, participants feel inspired in the room and then leave, how do we make sure that they are applying the pieces that they want to apply from the session, that those behavior changes that they're making are being recognized, course corrected, and are in alignment with what the organization actually wants? So I went on this, sort of 6-year pilgrimage. I interviewed authors for a while. I read a bunch of books. I started tinkering and experimenting. I built a little piece of tech with a guy that I hired off Twitter, which is what it was called back then. And we started really experimenting around bringing visibility to the behavior change that follows or doesn't on learning programs. So that was really the origin. And fast forward to today, we work with about 100 consulting and training firms around the globe, a handful of what I would call industry clients direct. And we have a now very robust piece of technology and, more importantly, methodology that sustains and drives change on learning programs.
Yeah. Well, that's a lot. It's good that you can see your purpose. I love that. I think a lot of people struggle with that in particular.
Hmm.
Just finding their reason, their why, their purpose. And sometimes it's the reflection about what you're doing that helps you get there. What's your highest priority for 2026? Do you have a New Year's resolution, or do you have some big priorities, some big things that you think need worked on in 2026?
Yeah, I think 2026 is industry wide going to be an interesting year. I think you alluded to this at the beginning, the fact that there's been a lot of hype. There's been a lot of fear, existential fear around the future of the industry, right? Like, does AI replace, a large portion of the L&D space? My answer categorically is no. We need to change and evolve, but we can get into that. For me personally, there's a couple things. One, we've been doing this work now for a long time. We've used the actionable change methodology, or what we call undeniable impact, on over 9,000 learning programs, over 100,000 participants. And it exists in research papers, it exists in other people's books, but I really feel that 26 is the year to codify it and make it available and accessible to folks. So a couple things with that. I'm working on a book, so we should be publishing in September on the actionable change methodology. Along with that, we're going to be launching a certification. So we've been teaching this stuff forever. We've had, 1,000 people go through it, but not in a sort of stamp of approval, industry certified manner. And so we're codifying that as well. So it's really around giving people a clear, not only, but a proven answer to how do I prove impact? How do I make it stick? And how do I show the powers that be that it is actually aligned with business priorities? So a little bit
Yeah.
more focus, deeper work this year.
Yeah, it's a big challenge. I mean, we're coming up on that time. By the time you hear this podcast, it's probably going to be around the time when most people realize they haven't lived up to their New Year's resolutions,
Right.
right? And habits are hard to change. We experience that every day in our life. So I don't know why we would think it would be any different in organizational life,
Yep.
right? And especially when you're moving lots of people. It's one thing for me to make a decision that I'm going to stop drinking coffee in the morning, right? And figure out how to do that. It's another thing when I need 100 people to stop drinking coffee in the morning, or whatever the case might be. I actually increased my drinking of coffee. So considering I didn't start drinking it until 3 years ago, but these habits are difficult. And when you think about that from a change and training perspective, and trying to move a larger group of people, become even more difficult. And I know one of the things you focus on from like a change perspective is how to prove whether it's working. And
Mhm.
and that's an area where most of the time we just do it in the hopes that it's going to happen.
Mhm.
And as somebody who has worked on a number of change projects, the level of focus that people put on the measurement is not what it should be.
Agreed. Yep. Or they do it too late, right? It's six
Yeah.
months later. They're like, well, can we prove it now? Like, what do you mean
Yeah.
prove it now? Like after the fact, we didn't have any benchmark. Anyway, yes, I totally agreed.
Yeah. And they come back and they want it like, so we need to do the change program over again
Right.
because it didn't stick.
Right. Right. Exactly. Well, I think, as you've alluded to, a large portion of the work that we are publicly known for is around that proof of impact. But as you've just, suggested, we can't prove it until we're actually making it happen. So there's really these two sides to the coin around how do we help more learners or employees in the case of a large scale change program that's not just L&D. How do we help them A, find a reason to want to change, B, make it easier for them to actually change, and then C, how do we demonstrate that that change is happening so that the right people can A, be informed, and B, course correct as appropriate.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a lot. And, organizationally, what's the why? Why are we doing
Hmm.
this? And quite frankly, I mean, coming into any organization, it's one thing if you've got a big program that you're trying to initiate and you need people to change in order to see the effects and, meet your strategic priorities. It's another thing when you're coming new into an organization and you find out, well, here's the program that we have, and why do you have this program? Well, because we've always had this program. So I always contend that, going into a new organization, you need to be thinking about I need to evaluate the things we're doing today. Are they the right things? Are they meeting those strategic priorities? What are we doing here?
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, 100%. I think there's a couple pieces in there for me. One is there's the collective why, and then there's the individual why. And I think both are so important, and it's not particularly common, as you've probably experienced, for both to be true. And so what I mean by that is we need the organizational why, exactly to your point around why does this program exist? What behaviors are we trying to shift, and why do those behaviors matter to inform the shape of the program? And in most cases, you can make a program substantially more efficient, both time and capital wise, by focusing on the behaviors we want to shift instead of the training we want to deliver. So that becomes the bigger why. Then on an individual level, for each individual participant, we've found way more success. I appreciate how statistically relevant that sounds. Way more, but
A
substantially
lot.
more success when, yes, by all means, share the organizational why, but then ask for the individual why and keep asking and create the time and space in the programming structure for each individual to find their own reason why. Because usually it's not going to be the same reason as the organizational why. The individual, if they're totally honest with themselves, doesn't typically care about increasing profit margins or market share or whatever those business drivers are, but they do want personal recognition and promotion and growth and feeling supported and so if we can help them find their own personal reason why, and they can be very different across the population, then you can get a substantially higher percentage of the people actually engaging with change. We find that when it's done well, you can have upwards of 85, 87% of the population actually proactively engaging in lasting change.
Yeah. Yeah. Everything's individual at
Yeah,
the end of the day. And if you work on these programs, you know what that means when you start to talk to individuals, right? And
yep,
and learn what is important to them and why do they care about this program. They don't care that we're getting a new HRIS, right?
right.
What they care about is, as you said, they care about recognition. They care about who they're working with. They care about, the outcome of something big that they might be working on and how successful that particular thing is, right? Yes, it's great to say the organization had success because that typically means I might get more money next year, I might get a bigger bonus, but so much of this is individual, and we have to be able to speak to those individuals, right? And reach those individuals. How do you do that? I mean, what are some of the ways that you connect those dots at the individual level when you go out from the macro? Here's the
Yep.
big program, but how do we get to the micro?
Yeah, great question. So a couple tactical pieces on any sort of communication session design. So whether that's a training workshop or whether that's a CEO town hall, there's a content context ratio that we find is usually imbalanced from what's most effective. What's most effective is a minimum 3-to-1 ratio, 3 parts context for every 1 part content. Meaning, if you're spending 10 minutes communicating a message, in an ideal world, there's at least 30 minutes of no new content, opportunity in small group or individual reflection or pairs to actually turn over the so what of that piece of content for them to contextualize what it looks like if we actually applied this in the future versus if we didn't. Who does it impact? How does it impact them? How does it make my life better? Why should I care about this? Where have I seen examples of this working well in the past? There's lots and lots and lots of facilitation questions. Katrina Kennedy just wrote a book that is literally all context questions on how you can actually help groups find this. But the key with it is to be far more discerning on what content has to be in the training session and cut out everything that's superfluous to allow more time and space for people to find the so what. So that's really step one, is take people from, I understand it at a cerebral level, to, oh, I actually care about this enough that I'd be willing to break the inertia of the status quo. Then the second part becomes, once I've got that good intention, now we're in a place sort of like New Year's Eve resolutions where I've got great intention. I'm going to get in shape. It's like, okay, well, good, except shape is not something you do. It's something you become, and you're already a shape. So what shape do you want to be? So we want to take it from good intention and turn it into a daily practice. And my friend Michael Bungay Stanier wrote a great book called The Coaching Habit, which talks about the new habit formula, which is basically when this thing happens, instead of doing this thing I normally do, I'll do this new thing because, and insert the reason why it matters. So I appreciate this is a bit of a monologue. If we can take content, create a 3-to-1 ratio for context so people can find a so what, and then give them the tools to turn it into a now what, we dramatically increase the likelihood that they're going to start the change effort. And then I can get into how we maintain it, but that's the crux of the session design itself.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you find any differences in design from more hands-on to just more lecture? Are there some big differences there in terms of what you guys see in results?
Yeah, the ratio holds regardless of the format. The structure is going to be a little bit different. So if we think about, in a training, let's say 2-hour training workshop, the goal would be 20 minutes to half an hour of content. The rest of it is context and now what. In the case of a CEO town hall, where it's not realistic for them to be engaging in dialogue with 20,000 employees, instead, what we want to do is on the heels of the town hall, which is effectively all content, then we want to move to local team discussions quickly, like within the week, where there's structure to it, but it's entirely context. And it's just referencing that content piece that came in the form of a, one directional message. Same thing with the keynote. The keynotes are fabulous. They're inspiring. They get people wanting change. But now what? Like, how do we turn this into a regular thing? And then how do we put the support systems in place? And so we work with a good number of keynoters to help them install the workshop system follow-up, which is not around teaching new stuff. It's about giving people the time to distill from head to heart. So yeah, regardless of the format, the goal becomes ensure that there's enough time and soon after for people to find the so what and shape a now what.
Yeah, yeah, that's a really good point. And there's not a lot of that going on that I mean, how many times do you walk out of a keynote at an event and think, oh, I'm like so jazzed. I'm like, I'm going to go and I'm going to change these 3 things, right? I'm going to go do exactly what they said because it sounds so perfect. It sounds like a real thing. And then they go back to their office and get caught up on email and forget all about what they learned, right?
Or even, if we go to the best case scenarios, they actually try. They do it, when they get back. The problem with it is that we're going to suck at it because it's new. Whatever it is, right? The first time we do something, we're not going to be great at it. And the challenge with that is that we've built reputations and careers on being good at what we do. So trying something new, not only is it uncomfortable and we're trying to overcome all of our unconscious programming, but it's also, we don't like not being good. So what we've found is that we really need to insulate that behavioral change. So, things like having an accountability partner, things like having a regular reflection process where something ideally external, we have a tool called the Habit Builder, but you could use anything that prompts you to say, hey, that thing you're working on, how's it going? And to rate and reflect. So I can start to see my progress over time. Those tools all become really important. But the crux of it is it's got to be something that we're committing to that's small, singular, and can be practiced regularly. This is one of my I have a love-hate relationship with conferences because a well-organized conference just blows out your brain with all of these great ideas. But now you're trying to apply a whole bunch of stuff at once. And as you said, like, we're not great at change, period. We're really not great at changing multiple things at the same time. Right. So my biggest advice for anyone going to a conference is take all the notes, but then before you leave the session, pick one thing that you're going to apply, create a baseline activity, and then anything else is bonus, but make that one thing the behavior change you're actually committed to.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that idea. And maybe find a buddy at the event who you can share that with, right? I know one of the things you talked about, you mentioned a minute ago, was this accountability partner. Talk a little bit about that and how important that is to sustaining the habit and the change.
It blows my mind that this isn't a default on all learning sessions. It's free to have an accountability partner. It's easy. All you need to do is have someone in the room, turn to each other, say, here's what I'm committed to from a change standpoint. Here's what I'm committed to from a change standpoint. Let's check in on Teams. Like, what, it doesn't have to be a call. Let's just check in a week and we'll ask 2 questions. What's working and what impact is it having for you?
Yeah.
That's it. If we can ask those, and we want to do this ideally within the first week. And then on roughly a weekly basis afterwards, we've seen, I don't have the report in front of me, but I think it's something like 3x the likelihood that someone sticks with their change by having an accountability partner that they interact with at least twice after the session. 3 times likely, more likely that they will actually stick with their change and realize it. So it's
Yeah.
massively impactful. It's so easy to do. It's almost silly when we don't do it.
Are you looking for a podcast that talks about humanity as well as human resources? Listen to the Reciprocity with AG podcast, where leaders in workforce and human resources talk more about themselves, how they reciprocate to others, and how they have received unbelievable advice for some of their mentors and people they've worked with.
Well, and it doesn't have to be an organizational mandate, right? I mean, you
No.
find your own accountability partner. Why do you think people don't do that? Do they not want to admit that they're having trouble changing, or do they just not want to put a burden on somebody else to help them do something? I
Yeah.
mean, seems easy. It seems like a
Yeah.
really easy solution, right?
It's really easy. I think there's a couple reasons. The first one goes back to someone actually find a reason deep enough that they want to change, that they would choose to leverage the tools that make it more likely that they will.
Yeah.
And I think we tend to gloss over that. And again, it comes back to too many training programs still are like 80% content, 20% context. And that doesn't get most people to a place where I actually care about this. And so, oh, sure, you'll get some, right? You'll get the people that are just, are what's Gallup's stat that's been the same forever. It's like 20% of people are engaged at work, and it's been there forever. Those 20 people, sure, they're going to commit to something after, but everybody else is not. So,
Yeah.
number one, I think the reason people don't choose an accountability partner is because they don't have a strong enough reason to want to change. So why would I add extra things into my calendar? Whereas when there's a mental flip from this commitment to change is something that I have to do because I was told to something that I want to do because I can see the benefits, then putting in things like the habit builder or accountability partners or regroup sessions or coaching sessions are tools that will increase the likelihood that I achieve the thing I want to achieve. So I really
Yeah.
think that's number one. People need to care enough. And then number two, we just need to remind them that accountability partners are a good thing. Because again, most of us don't go through life immediately thinking of accountability partners. So I would say there's some onus on the facilitator to encourage this if they want change to happen. And just to show some stats, and there's lots of stats out there on the power of accountability partners.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you seen a lot of benefit in the idea of cohorts where you have a small, group of people, maybe 10 to 20 people that come together for a particular learning that sort of stay together down the road? Have you seen higher benefits of that and more success in change than just sort of everybody show up to a training or a learning and
Oh, for
walk
sure.
away?
Yeah, in two parts. So I don't believe, or the data doesn't suggest that cohort learning negates the value of accountability buddies. You can stack these things and they become, they build upon each other. The cohort size, I literally just posted about this 10 minutes before we got on this call. If you can get a cohort size less than 10, so single digit participants, you will dramatically increase the likelihood that people stick with their commitments. And particularly if you have them revisiting, so in a cohort over time, right, where they're
Yeah.
reconnecting as a group. The key with that, there's a couple things you can do in there. One is to normalize what we're going to do in this cohort. So is this cohort around passive consumption or is it around active behavior change? And if it's active behavior change, why and what does that look like? A dear friend and colleague who passed away a couple of years ago used to challenge, she worked exclusively with senior leaders in large companies, and she would challenge them. It was leadership programs. And she would say, how often do we want to practice this behavior? Whatever it was. And they would say, oh, twice a week or on Mondays at our meeting. And she would pause and she would say, oh, interesting. So we're only really interested in improving our leadership one day a week. Is that what I'm hearing? And again, Mandy could get away with it. But I'm like, no, of course we want to do this every day. Of course you do every day. And so it would normalize that this group, the plan was we were actually going to work on shifted behaviors every day. And then at the beginning of the next workshop, the very first 10 minutes would be reviewing the data. In the case she was using actionable, but at least having a discussion around, so what happened, right? Where did we get some wins? Where did we fall down? How did we do as a group? How did we do individually? Can we share some best practices? And when we bring that sort of expectation and pure alignments to the conversations, you sort of can't help but make some change happen.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think social media has helped or hurt change?
That's a great question. That's a great question. Here's my 10-second of thinking take. I think the challenge with social media, I'll go with challenge first and then the benefits. So the challenge with social media when it comes to change is that we get into a state of analysis paralysis. That whole point around how humans are really bad at changing multiple things at once. When we are drinking from the proverbial fire hose of all the things that I could change, we start a bunch of things because, oh, that looks good, or oh, I can see that person's winning with that. And then it doesn't work immediately because that's not how change happens. And then because we have a never ending stream of new things to inspire us, we can rush off to the next shiny object and we end up spinning in circles. On the plus side, social media makes basically the how to on anything accessible by a few clicks. And
Yeah.
so if you're committed to change around something and you choose a path and stick with it, then social media can be great for giving you visibility to what that path could be and potentially some social accountability if you're sharing it publicly. I think the cons outweigh the pros because most of us would prefer to start something new because it feels exciting than to actually stick with it through the messy middle and to realize the other side.
Yeah. Yeah. It is hard. And sometimes you get on a roll, and then something breaks it,
Hmm.
right? My husband has tried forever to get back into a new sleep cycle,
Yep.
right? And 2 weeks, he'll be going, it's all going really well. And then something transpires to break it one day,
Hmm.
and then it's over,
Yeah.
right? You can't get back. And so there is a level of commitment
Yep.
that there's certain things you just have to ignore. Otherwise, you're going to fall off the proverbial wagon, right? So yeah,
Yeah.
it's an interesting conundrum that just it affects us all.
There's something interesting in there, particularly as it comes to New Year's resolutions around sort of the brittleness of these behavior change commitments. The idea of streaks and uninterrupted streaks are great and not always realistic. And I think the problem with it is that when people do have an inevitable lapse, because we're humans and there's stuff going on in our life, that people tend to beat themselves up so much that it takes them a long time to get back to it. Brene Brown wrote many years ago about permission slips. And permission slips are the idea that you can literally write them by hand if you want to, but ahead of time to say, I give myself permission to, miss a night a month or miss a night a week or whatever for your husband with the sleep piece
Yeah.
or 2 nights a week or whatever. But it's something where you acknowledge ahead of time that we're human, we're fallible, and give yourself some grace. It works really nicely for me with the mantra at my gym, right? Which is not just exclusive to my gym, but it's day one always. And so whatever happened yesterday kind of doesn't matter. Today's the choice as to am I doing the thing or am I not doing the thing? And I think it gives us a permission to reset and to say it's okay that whatever happened yesterday happened. Today's day one. And so I'm going to do the thing that I know is valuable and important to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Do the thing. I like
Do the
that.
thing.
Wait, that's our new instead of what's the Nike
Just do it.
just do it. We're
Yep.
gonna have do the thing.
Do the thing.
Love
Yeah,
it.
and thing being singular. Don't do the things. That's the other, big problem with New Year's resolutions is I'm going to get in shape and I'm going to be a better spouse and I'm going to be a better husband and I'm going to quit smoking and I'm going to, all the things. And it's like, well, no, we don't. That's not how we change. So pick
Yeah.
one. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. So what are your thoughts on as we think about how we take this into the future? Because we're all consumed with this sort of how AI is going to
Yep.
impact our world. And at some level, some of us have kind of probably said, I'm not going to worry about that right now because it ebbs and flows, right? Like
Yep.
one day you're reading an article about how tomorrow you're going to be out of a job, and the next day you're reading an article about how it's not doing anything and here's all the problems and don't worry about it. It's just, it's such a dichotomy of ideas out there.
Mhm.
How do you see AI affecting work and then affecting the way that we change or, how our behaviors impact how this is going to come to fruition?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if we fast forward even 18 months to try to crystal ball where AI is going to impact our lives, I mean, I could throw out some ideas, but what I tend to focus on more so is what's not going to change. And from those foundational elements, then looking at how do we leverage some of the things that do change around us. So one of the things that I mean, the data, our lived experience over the last 20 years is just very clear, is that moving from I understand how to change to I care enough to want to change happens through human dialogue, period. It's human beings sitting down, hearing what others have to say, sharing their own thoughts, talking it out. And it goes, you can almost picture it sinking from I understand it cerebrally to, oh, wow, this actually matters to me. And so I think AI makes content super accessible and hyper relevant to our specific needs and circumstances. It's only going to continue to increase as it gets access to more and more data. So the how of change becomes commoditized and largely free. The do I care enough to want to change, at least for the foreseeable future, in my eyes, is the sort of the hallmark of good facilitation, of good consulting, good coaching, is to help individuals work through the what to find the so what and then shape it into now what. So I think and I think it's overdue, to be honest, because I think the role of good facilitation has always been to help people find the so what, now what. But we
Yeah.
spend way too many decades as an industry over engineering shiny experiences that are fun, but they're missing the point. And so I see it optimistically that the rise of AI and the democratization of content creation leads to facilitators being recognized for what they truly should be doing, which is supporting and driving change.
Yeah. You said something interesting there that made me think about back to the accountability partner,
Mhm.
because as I'm thinking about, do I want to change? Does it matter? And is it better that I've found somebody who also cares whether I make this change or not, right? Like it's
Yep.
definitely internal, but at the same time, we want to be recognized externally as
Yep.
well. And so making that change has to be important to us,
Yep.
but having somebody who it's sort of also important to, whether that's a spouse or a friend or a child or whoever,
Yeah.
your work partner, your boss, whatever the case might be, that feels like a strong reason to me to have that accountability partner, because now you've got somebody else who cares.
Yes, 100%. And if they're going through change, either the same change or something similar because they were a colleague, there's okay, if we take a step back, the two things that AI can't touch is your world, as in your lived experiences, and your worldview, your perspective that's being shaped by those experiences. It just can't because it's not experiencing things currently,
Yeah.
until the robots take over. And so if you're going through stuff and gaining perspective on it, and someone else is going through stuff and gaining perspective on it, and you come together to talk about those experiences and find new shared understanding, that's going to be more effective than the most empathetic AI bot, because the AI can't contribute, it can only reflect. And I think that's the piece that so often gets missed because so part of what Actionable does is we have a nudge technology that reminds people to reflect on their progress and it collates the
Yeah.
data and uses AI. But what gets missed is people are like, well, I can just do that with AI. It's like you can, but it's not going to be as effective as the social layer that gets built into Actionable. But I think all strong learning programs, it's about the tribe and it's about the sort of tribe within a tribe. This, to your point from earlier, the small cohort going through a learning journey together has value beyond more content or 24/7 onness of a bot.
Yeah, yeah. Although a lot of people are using them today to
Mhm.
help with this process, I'll be interested to see some of the outcomes. Like, are they able to get the same level of empathy and coaching from that process that they might get from a live person?
So my hypothesis is they're going to get substantially more than they would in where most budgets don't allow for human coaching. And it's not going to be as much as when they actually have a human, so long as they're a capable human coach. But
Yeah.
that's why I love the buddies and the cohort model, is that they don't need to have the expertise or the particular language or facilitation skills. They need to be working through a parallel challenge and having an opportunity to share and a safe space to share their experience going through that. And we see it
Yeah.
again. This isn't theory. This is, we've got last year there was, I don't know how many, it was probably 18,000 accountability buddy relationships on the actionable platform. And so we
Yeah.
see it, and we see how they realize greater change than.
Yeah, you're right. And that vulnerability to, you know, allow somebody else to know that you're struggling with this particular thing, especially in a professional environment where you're a fairly senior person in the organization. Do you really want people to know that you don't feel comfortable having a conversation with an employee about their performance? Probably not, right? There's only certain people you would trust with that information, and that you're trying to learn how to get better at, or how to continue to improve in that particular area of leadership, or whatever the area is that you want to engage in. So yeah, you don't want to tell your boss, "Hey, I really suck at this. I need to get an accountability partner." Yeah,
Yeah.
interesting. So this has been really fascinating. And if everybody on this call doesn't go out and find an accountability partner tomorrow to help them with
That's it.
something, I'll be shocked. But what's one thing that you can leave the audience with today that you think might help them sort of think about their challenges and what it is they're trying to change as an individual, and how that also might impact change in their organization?
Sure. Big question, Terry, to wrap things up. So there's a couple things. Well, first of all, I'll give you a tool. So I took the sort of 20% of everything we do in Actionable and built a toolkit. It's free, actionable.co/toolkit. It'll help you think through, particularly if you're responsible for learning programs, it'll help you think through the design, the positioning, the sustainment, and the proof of impact on those programs so you can make learning stick. So that's the easy answer. Go get the toolkit. There's about an hour and a half of training built into it. There's a self-assessment. And again, it's all free. When it comes to our personal change, and particularly depending on when you're listening to this at the beginning of the year, if you take a look at the things that you've said you want to shift this year, just start cutting. Like, cut it down to one, if at all humanly possible, and then figure out what the one behavioral shift is. So what's the daily version of that thing? So if I want to build personal brand, right? That's one of the things I want to do this year. And I know that I'm good on video, then every morning I'm going to shoot a video. So it would look something like, when I sit down at my desk in the morning, instead of opening email, I will open my phone and I will talk into the camera for 60 seconds. Now, is that a polished video? No, but it's the first step. It breaks the inertia, and that's the whole point. So work it down to one. And if you're looking at your list being like, but Chris, I've got 3 or 5 or 12 priorities for the year and I need to do all these things, then let's stack them sequentially as opposed to trying to start them all at once. What's the one you want to do in January or in February or whenever you're starting this? And what's the smallest version of that? And go. We get way more done when we focus on less.
Yeah. Yeah. Eat the elephant one bite at a time, as they like to say. We do tend to look at problems as really, really big. And when you break them down into manageable parts, they become, you become much more comfortable. But sometimes it's hard to do that. Well, that's great advice. I think going back to something you said at the beginning too, is sort of what's your purpose. And if you feel like you know what your purpose is, then I think it makes it easier to find the things that matter the most, right? When you start to think about change. Well, this has been fantastic. I hope people go to the website and download the toolkit. I'm going to go download it after this call myself and look for how I can be better in 2026 as well. Just so you know, the annual HR Systems Survey report is out. So go to the website, sapieninsights.com, and check that out. There's also segments. So if you're looking for something specific, you can get chunks of that, get it broken down. Be sure to listen to Stacy and Cliff next week while they spill the tea on HR tech. I want to thank Chris for joining me today. Thank you so much. It's been a great conversation. and actionable.co. Please go there and check it out. I also want to thank our producers, the Brand Method Media Group. I want to thank our marketing team, and I want to thank you for tuning in. That's all the time we have for this episode of HR We Have a Problem. If you enjoyed the episode, you can subscribe to it on your favorite podcast app. We'd love it if you'd leave us a review, or just let us know what topics you want to hear about this year so we can line up a good schedule and get the right people on the show for you. We will be back in 2 weeks with another episode of HR We Have a Problem. Thanks, everybody.